Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I quoted Jake Sullivan's definition of, or indication of why this was necessary, in which he said the problem is circumventing the spirit of export controls. I don't quote that because I want to criticize or mock this. What I want to do is underscore the sort of imprecise and vague and not terribly well-defined nature of the problem we're trying to solve. So maybe we could start, and Professor, I have to ask you to please be very, very short if you could. If you could give us a specific example of a transaction, a process, something that is not captured under existing export controls and you think we would all agree is problematic.
I'm sure. So I don't claim to speak for the National Security Advisor, and I also share many of the concerns that you mentioned before about, making sure to scope.
Right.
But as a hypothetical, Commerce recently announced 4 new tech controls under Section 1758. One newly controlled technology is a specific electronic computer aid design software that is...
Okay, but this is, just to be clear, this is a hypothetical. This
is a hypothetical. I don't want to talk about specific transactions.
Do you know of specific transactions?
Yes, but I don't want to talk about specific transactions that would implicate a particular company. So I'm just saying that if a U.S. company invested in a Chinese entity that was trying to develop this controlled technology indigenously, then... but it was trying to develop it indigenously without using U.S. controlled tech, that would be an indication, in my mind, of a company trying to circumvent the spirit of export controls.
All right. There's another aspect to this. Maybe Mr. Ashu, am I saying that correctly, Mr. Ashu?
It rhymes with cashew.
Okay, Mr. Ashu. China's obviously got a lot of accumulated capital. Plenty of money. Government has enormous resources. Private sector has enormous resources. So would you agree that if there's a problem here, the problem isn't providing money. The problem is something else. And we know that the export restriction regime has the ability to limit the export of products, including software. So it seems to me what we're really getting at here, what comes up periodically in the discussion, is this much more difficult to define concept of like know-how, expertise, professionalism, process, a way of doing business that is likely to enhance your ability to be successful. Is that, how would you react to that characterization of what seems to me to be the thing that folks are going after?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I actually think there's only one area that, in a specific way, presents a disconnect between the goals and the authorities, and that's cash money. It's conceivable that an end user that would be export restricted could still receive U.S. investment, and that to me is a disconnect. I don't have a specific example because during my time at BIS, I didn't encounter one. But I think it's important to, on the question of associated transfer of intangibles like know-how, the Export Administration Regulations covers that. It defines technology primarily as information. So it's important to think it's not just the phone or this pen, it's the manual that goes with it. That's technology. That is controlled in whatever form, usually intangible, that it goes. So we have a very robust and textured series of regulations that are already in place that with some adjustment could address whatever concerns there are.
Mr. Fetto, I wonder if you could address, we're at a situation where we might have an executive order come out in the absence of legislation. We might be able to get legislation done. Could you just discuss a little bit your sense of how important it is that whatever is done here is defined in statute by Congress?
Senator, I think this is the prerogative of the Congress. It's Article 1 of the Constitution for a reason, and you have explicit authority to regulate commerce with foreign nations. Such a complicated issue in question, and the problem hasn't been sufficiently designed. an executive order that creates this committee, when you create a committee like this, a bureaucracy, it's not going to be unwrung. But there's so many questions, as I list in my written testimony, that I think need to be answered in terms of capacity, how many transactions we expect to capture, what sort of risk analysis would be involved, how are we going to fund this committee, accountability, who's in charge and has the institutional heft within the executive branch to move forward and implement it in an appropriate way, and then answer to committees of jurisdiction in oversight. All of that comes with legislation and not necessarily with an executive order. The statute also gives an opportunity, as I've maintained, for the Congress to build a record, to get folks from the administration on the record to identify the problem and answer precisely the question you just posed to my fellow witnesses about an example of a gap. Those sorts of things we did during FIRMA. The Treasury Department, Commerce, DOD came up here and worked with you all and explained gaps. We had the intelligence community brief the Congress on the gaps that needed to be filled. As far as I'm aware, that sort of dialogue and establishment of a record and a foundation for this kind of committee has not yet been executed here.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.